So we are back. Let us pick the first. Let's look at the rule again. Okay, the rule says when a compound subject joined by "and" gives the impression of a unit. When a compound subject joined by "and" gives the impression of a unit, the verb becomes a singular verb as in the following examples. Now let us look at our example 1. Our example 1 says bread and butter is ready. All right, bread and butter. When we have bread, the next thing we remember is butter. When we have bread, the next thing we remember is butter. Therefore, the two of them are one. It is not, you cannot sit down and be consuming butter alone. It is not possible. It is not done. But when you have bread, you begin to ask, please, do you have butter? Oh, yes, we have butter. Then the two of them go hand in hand. So you underline bread and butter. When you underline bread and butter, you point your arrow downward in the second line. In the third line, you write your S1. Okay, so the two of them are. Then they said it's ready. So under that is ready. Is a singular verb. So that is what we are going to underline. So when we underline is, there we have it means our S1 has taken V1. So you don't say bread and butter are ready. If you say that, it means you have made bread and butter plural, which is not so. So therefore, the correct form is bread and butter is ready. So we go to our example 2. Example 2 says Gari and soup is tasty. Gari and soup is tasty. Under that, Gari is cassava flakes that has been roasted to dry. The water has been squeezed from the cassava, and then they grinded it at the mill, and then with milling machine. Okay, they grinded it with the milling machine, and then they squeeze out the water. After squeezing out the water for some days, and then they roast it again. When they roast it, it becomes something like flakes. Okay, cassava flakes. So that is what so when you want to consume it, you either use hot water. If you use hot water to prepare it, they call it eba. But if you want to drink it, you just pour water on it and then you add some sugar. Many people do that in the afternoon. It's very good consumption, especially in the afternoon or during the heat period towards the rainy season. All right, when the weather is very hot. So we have so you underline gari and soup. When you underline gari and soup, that becomes one. It is one. You cannot consume the eba. That is eba, is what they are calling gari here. So you cannot consume it without soup. So they go hand in hand. You underline it and then you point your arrow downward. When you point your arrow downward, then the third line you write your S1. Then we have is tasty. Under is tasty, you underline is. You underline is, then is becomes our V1. It is wrong to say gari and soup are tasty. If you say that, it means you have separated them, but they are one. Okay, so the correct form is gari and soup is tasty. So we go to our example 3. Example 3 says example 3 says trial and error results in success. Trial and error results in success. We know that it is not it is unusual for you to try something once and be successful. Okay, so when you try something and you fail, you try and fail, it's not a new thing. At the end of the day, you will succeed. As you keep on trying, you will succeed. That is what this one is saying, telling us now. So trial and error, trial and mistake go hand in hand. So the the two of them are considered to be a unit. So trial and error, you underline trial and error. When you underline trial and error, you point your arrow down on the second line. The third line, you write your S1. So trial and error is our S1. Then results in success. Results. Okay, results. So under that, you underline results. Results becomes our singular verb. So you point your arrow downward and then you write in the third line, you write your V1. So we go to our example 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 5 says tea and bread is there on the table. Tea and bread is there on the table. We know that tea and bread go hand in hand. If you take tea without bread, how do you feel? So tea and bread go hand in hand. So when you so they are the two of them are considered to be to be one unit. So you underline it, and when you underline it, your arrow will point downward, and then you in the third line you write your S1. So tea and bread is singular. Then we have is there on the table. So under that you underline is. Okay. The past tense of is was there on the table. So if you say is there on the table or was there on the table, the two of them are correct. Or you say tea and bread has been served. Has is singular, so it's still correct. Tea and bread has been served. It's still correct. So we have is there on the table. Under that we have is. You underline is, and then your arrow points downward the second line. The third line you write your V1. So tea and bread is our S1, and that's taken is as our V1. So you don't say tea and bread are there on the table. That is wrong. If you say that, it means you've separated them. You've made them each one. That's a separate entity. Okay. That so if you have made it plural, which is wrong because the two of them are related. If you get one, you think of the other. Tea, bread. Tea, bread. Sometimes when you get bread, you don't think of tea. You may think of beans or egg. But anytime you grab tea, a cup of tea, the next thing that comes to your mind is bread. So that's why you consider them to be one. So you don't say tea and bread are there on the table. It is wrong. Tea and bread is there on the table. It's correct. So let's just go to 6. We go to 6. So before we go to 6, let us observe our 2 seconds break. Okay.